questions? Yes, please, Terry. Yeah.
Yeah, just some quick reactions. I think Dr. Hyde, you convinced me, but also you mentioned something which is very important, which is to give the problem a name. We've been working with hundreds of people on why government irrigation policies are not working, why institutional reform is not working, and so we gave it a name, which is a failure to manage these transitions. Once we agree that this is the problem statement, then we can work on this. So I think this is what we tried to do. Ravi asked to look at indicators. So in our white paper, we proposed that the farmers' incomes be measured against minimum wage. Because if you just focus on reducing poverty, with the poverty indicator, people will go from $1.3 to $1.6 per day, and so what? We are asked to have smart farmers who respond to markets, who are sustainable, who use all sorts of smart practices, and in practice they earn half of the minimum wage. How can we expect them to do that? So maybe a type of indicator like this. Dr. Kim, you mentioned trade-offs. So I would like to suggest also that trade should be a very important issue, because a key issue for a number of governments is trade-offs between economic water productivity and food security. So the more people think that there are risks associated with trade or imports, the more they feel they have to allocate water resources to their own producing their own food. So in terms of looking at the future, to have a proper trade-offs, probably regional cooperation and trade would be very important. And finally, Ponce, you're very enthusiastic. Unfortunately, we don't find very enthusiastic young farmers or old farmers. And we don't see farmers who are enthusiastic about the future of their children in farming. And it's really a question also for sustainability. You're from India, maybe. You know that in India, farmers are mining groundwater resources deliberately so that they can make enough money so they can buy an education for their children so that they can get out of there. So unless you promise them a kind of a promising future, they will continue to do that. And we go back to issues of what kind of future for our farmers in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kim, anyone, colleagues would like to respond, or no? Or nothing to respond, or anything?
Yes, I'd quite like to respond. I think that, Thierry, that last point you made was one that I thought about when you were presenting earlier. I'm from a country that actually produces excess food, but the challenges we've had in our farming communities in the last 20 years, particularly, is that people are leaving the farms, and I think the challenges of us producing more food and greater agricultural production on our rural communities is something we really do need to be quite careful about. So I'd like to support that. I thought that when you presented earlier.
Yeah, I just recognize, actually, I do not have your name on my list. So, yeah. Now you're the last one on the panel for the first round. Yes, please. Mark. Would you like to respond? No, I do not have Mark's name here.
I'm not known
I had
for
the
staying
previous.
quiet.
Sorry. No, my version was the previous one.
Can
you please also respond to your response to
Sure.
The key issues that we discussed already? Thank you.
Sure. Well, one of the things that there's a couple of things that I've thought about during the afternoon, and I'm leading a capacity building organisation currently, and one of the things I think about is what I'm going to try and describe as T-shaped water professionals. So I think of the people in this room and the people that who I think have been, or the institutions who I think have been successful in integrated water resources management, or indeed in addressing complex problems, are those where we have a deep understanding of technical issues, but we also have the ability to think and act and join dots across across our sectors. So if I go to Dr. Kim's comments earlier about working with other ministries, I think, for example, to work with other ministries, you have to have another language. You have to put your water language away for a moment and develop another language. So I think one of the things that we need to do in our sector is to have more T-shaped people. That just doesn't mean they've got big heads. I think we've got to be able to operate across disciplines, across sectors, across ministries, and so I think that's fundamentally important for the transition that we're in, because we do need to make step changes. We can't just keep going incrementally. So we've really got to do something quite different. And I suppose if I can add then, I think that we need champions. And Ponce, I talked to Ponce in the back of the room earlier, and he was worried about coming up here, and I said, well, so am I. I'm almost intimidated by some of our youth, and if I think back to when I was that age, I wouldn't have been game, Ponce, to be sitting where you are. So I think we need to foster champions in our sector, and that's champions at all levels. And dare I use the word leadership? Someone did use the word before, but I haven't heard it much this afternoon. I think we really do need to encourage leadership and not be afraid to push forward our young leaders. And before I came here, I was in that other city. This is not an easy event to negotiate, but I was in a session on women in water, and I think that's, Ravi, you talked about embracing in your summary, embracing other groups. You mentioned the youth, and I think the gender issue, or the women in water and the diversity, and the men in water for that matter, but the gender issues in water, I think, need to be addressed, and we need more women leaders.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Yes, please. Yes, please, Dr. Kim.
Let me talk on this water for food. That food security is very critical. And if we look at now Asia's water use, then more or less about 80% of the water is being used for agriculture. So if we want to address this water security, then we need to look at how we can enhance productivity in agriculture or water use in the food production. This is very critical. If we do not handle this, then even the other area, we can improve water efficiency. It's very limited. That's why now we need to think about how we can help these agriculture sectors to improve productivity so that we can have win-win situation. So this is very critical. And in that sense, in ADB, in our now agriculture project or irrigation project, now every project we are addressing productivity enhancement because this should be done. Then another area we need to look at is now food waste. This one we need to address this. Because if you look at the data, Some said 30%, some said 40% of these crops, or that's wasted. In developing countries, because of many infrastructure issues that connecting to markets or storages or even some skills to have this after this harvesting, that even simple skills or simple infrastructures we can address a lot. So it's a very nonsense. Most of the water is being used by agriculture, and then about 40% we are wasted. So it's a very easy way we can address this. So I feel now we need to be serious on how we can help to reduce this food waste, in particular developing countries. Then another one is now wastewater or water reuse for food production. Now we need to talk about this, because now even we visit in several water utilities and wastewater treatment facilities. After water treated, wastewater treated, then the water is reasonably clean, but that water is just wasted. That's not connected to other use. For instance, some agricultural production, or even that can be connected to energy. I can give you just one example. Recently, ADB approved private sector project. Private sector, I'm talking, not public. Private sector project for wastewater treatment in China. Then that treated water will be used for cooling water in energy. That's money. That's enough for them to invest wastewater treatment. So I feel now we need to connect different dots in water. Otherwise, everybody feel we need more water and you have problem. So if we can connect, then there are some room for us to improve the efficiency and also remove some unnecessary waste. But this is the area I feel we need to think about.
No, thank you, Dr. Kim. Those are great points to add. I'm going to start a round of priority things recommended by the panelists here for our region to consider in terms of importance. You can rank them. And we all talked about the role of government. And so political will, the government is very, very important in terms of setting the directions, certainty of policies, as well as targets. So I'll be interested to hearing from Mr. Rahim Zoda, and from the government perspective, what do you think? What could happen actually in order to make sure water security is lifted high up there at the national government agenda? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Basically, as I said during my presentation, the water in the top of the agenda in Tajikistan in the highest priority. It has been given the highest priority by the government. Why? Because it's a main source of our life in Tajikistan. As I said, more than 99% of electricity comes from water, from hydropower. And our country does not have sufficient resources of gas and oil. That's why since even gaining the sovereignty in 1991, Tajikistan, the government pays high attention to resolution of water issues. And that's why the government of Tajikistan also has provided a number of water resolutions, initiated a number of water resolutions to the UN, and most of popular of them, it's announcing of 2003 as International Year of Fresh Water, and then the period of 2005-15, the International Decade for Action Water for Life, and 2013 as International International Year of Water Cooperation. And the government, what we are doing now, because we're also facing some challenge in water resources management in our country. Even we have plenty of water resources, we face a number of challenges, including the floods, even the droughts in some part of our country. and still having the 99% of electricity coming from water in wintertime, the river flow is reducing. And Tajikistan, since, I don't know, 10, 15 more years, we are facing the shortage of electricity during the wintertime. And only in the main cities the population will receive electricity during wintertime. But in the rural areas, in wintertime, so far, Tajikistan people will receive only 6 or 8 hours electricity because of lack of storage to accumulate water resources to produce electricity in wintertime. And why we are promoting also water cooperation on the regional and the international level? Because Tajikistan depends also from other countries. Why, for example, we are facing the lack of electricity? Because Tajikistan has been disconnected from Central Asia power grid, and we cannot receive electricity from the third countries. At the same time, in summertime, we have enough water to produce electricity, to generate electricity, but because of lack of market of electricity, we cannot export our electricity to other countries. That is a problem, and I think only cooperation between countries will give us such kind of opportunity to improve all the situation. I mean, to receive electricity in wintertime or to export electricity in summertime. But nevertheless, of course, one of the most priority issues in Tajikistan also drinking water supply. Even we have the plenty of water resources, still only 57% of electricity of our population has an access to safe drinking water. And you know, our president attended the opening ceremony of the Seven World Water Forum, and His Excellency mentioned that the most problem is infrastructure and financing. Infrastructure and financing. We were talking a lot about capacity building, about institutional mechanism, legal basis, data availability, building the trust, transparency, etc., etc., etc. But having all these means of implementation, but do not have infrastructure, you are not able to manage the situation. But for infrastructure, you need financing. That's why financing is also very important. And we are looking that our development partners will work with us in this regard. And this makes our water secure country in the future, I think. And the same, it's not only for Tajikistan, but for all Central Asia regions. Of course, I can talk a lot about the programs, strategies, and one more issue I would like to underline here, it's a reform of water sector in Tajikistan. And we saw that we have many problems, and the government of Tajikistan has decided to reform the water sector. We started this process on November 2013, which means that the first principle was separation of policy and regulation issues from the operational functions. We did it by creating the Ministry of Energy and Water Resources, which is responsible for policy and regulation issues, and some operators, they are working on the technical issues. And the second one is a transition to integrated water resources management, and the first principle in this way is a transition to basin water management. So far we are managing our water resources within the boundaries of administration boundaries units. And we just before coming to Seven World Water Forum, we submitted the draft strategy reform of water sector to the government of Tajikistan, when we are looking that maybe in the nearest future the government will approve this strategy, and that will play a basic role for our future reform process. But reform itself is a process which takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, financial, technical, etc., etc. And only by support of the government and the development process, we think that we will be able to implement this reform successfully.
Sure.
Thank
Can
you.
I just ask you, how about the pricing of water in your country?
So far, the price of water in Tajikistan very low. Basically, we are talking about not about the price of water, but price of services. So price of services of those companies who are providing the water for irrigation systems, or providing water to operate for population for drinking water supply, etc. And I can say that for irrigation, for example, such kind of services per cubic meter of water is very low. It's a 1.5 dirham. It would be less than 1 cent.
But would that be part of your reform, sector reform?
Of course, we are, the tariff regulation, tariff policy is part of this reform.
Okay.
So within the reform, it would be also calculated, and our focus is to achieve in the future the economically sustainable irrigation or water system in Tajikistan.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Eid, and I would like to ask you, in the UN process, now we are almost at the very end of the MDGs, so now everyone is looking into SDGs. Do you see the SDG process or targets we set at the very end will become the major driver for countries to work around water security issues, particularly from this region?
Well, at the moment, we have a consensus paper, which was delivered by the Open Working Group, of UN member states. And there are 17 goals. Some people say, well, these are too many, but if you have such an ambitious agenda like sustainable development, then maybe 17 goals are even too little. Yeah, but we have 17 goals, and behind this, each goal is a constituency. Yeah, so these constituencies behind water, behind cities, behind health, I think they are the driving forces that then also what has been decided will be implemented. Of course, we don't know whether they will be decided, but my feeling is that listening, the G77 and other groupings are not interested to reopen the paper. So I am almost confident that the SDGs as they are in the moment will be decided. Now the water SDG, we have one dedicated water goal, number 6. But what is important also to me, and what I have heard here today, the nexus approach is a little bit ingrained. It's not systematically in the SDGs, but you can see, for example, in the SDG cities, there is water and disaster. Yeah. And in other goals, you have interlinkages. And what is then necessary is that the indicators, to measure the progress to reach the targets, are seen as an interdependent linkage. Yeah. So if we take it very serious, I'm quite confident that first they will be decided. But second, if we take it then serious, we have to have good monitoring systems. Yeah, we have to have a platform that is reviewing the process, that governments are really doing what they have agreed in New York. That is always a problem. No, it's very easy for the heads of states to be in New York and to sign a paper, but what is happening afterwards? So what is necessary is to link, the international discussions with the regional discussions. And I think your region here is well prepared. When I have listened to what you have decided and discussed today, I'm absolutely impressed. Yeah, what knowledge, what impetus there is, and what dedication. So I'm quite sure if you take it up here in the region to see to it that your governments are implementing what they have decided. We will come together in 5 years' time, and we hopefully see some progress. If I hear the minister talking about the reforms, this is very encouraging. Yeah. So linking the national and regional to the international discussion, I think this is where you have to link this, so that it is not you do something here and what is decided in New York is something else. So I think, but I'm very confident that this is going to happen.
Thank you. Can I just ask you, following up, say, for instance, on climate change issue, we have I'm asking a follow-up question. Say, on climate change issues, we have international process, the COP, convention, whatever. There isn't that sort of a level platform to address the water security issue. So I'm just wondering whether this SDG thing will become the convening power in terms of for regions coming together or international community coming together to address the water issues. And if not, what are the alternatives?
No, I don't think that the framework as such is the driving force. I think that you need maybe, and this is, it's interesting that you're asking that question because our board has had a working meeting the last 2 days. We were not really in the WWF discourse, but we also had our own discussions because we are finishing our mandate at the end of this year. And we are asked from the Secretary General to make suggestions for the future. What has to be done that the SDGs will be implemented? Now, on water, we have seen that the water sector is not such a dynamic sector than the climate discourse, yeah. So we are suggesting to look into the ICCP, how this model, how they are functioning, and then maybe we can draw some lessons learned from them to see that the water sector can get such a dynamic process in motion. Yeah, but I also have learned that the water sector as such is also very diverse. So maybe you have here the World Water Forum, then you have the Stockholm Water Week, then you have the Singapore, then you have the Amsterdam, then you have the GWP, and you name them, yeah? Maybe if these organizations would also interlink each other, come together, and even then interact with the energy sector, because energy and water is very highly linked. So there are various ideas, yeah? So the SDG can only be a framework, and then we have to see how the individual goal will then be implemented. Sure. And of course there we need a lot of initiatives to do that.
Very good suggestions. I'm going to move to Mark, and now I remember you. I would like to get some 2 or 3 or a list of priority issues that we will be able to bring up at the regional level at least. As Dr. Ida said, we do not have very effective international process to address water security issues in many, many ways. It's in the hands of the national government. But in the meantime, there are a lot of issues that could be lifted up at the regional level because it's so important to our region. What are the 2 very important things that, or recommendations you would offer that could become, at the regional level, become very, very important, or you would like to see addressed? Thank you.
Good. That's a good question. What comes immediately to mind is the group under whose auspices we're sitting here, the Asia Pacific Water Forum. I think it started indeed at a World Water Forum in 2003, not far away from here in Japan, and I think it's a real strength, and I think perhaps the governments of this region could be supporting the Asia Pacific Water Forum, perhaps to a greater extent, and that we use it literally as a bridging organisation, which I don't think it really does at the moment. We could, because I see bridging organisations perhaps as, and Ravi referred to apex organisations as similarly perhaps. I think they're the sorts of organisations that can operate across boundaries, probably without the complicated governance structures that we tend to put in place in things like banks and what have you. So perhaps we can be a bit more flexible and nimble and rely more strongly on some of these structures that can operate across the region. So I suppose I'm arguing for some sort of strengthening almost of the forum in this region. What else might I?
You can just stick to this one, which is a good point already, actually.
Yeah.
Dr. Bin Abdullah, what are the 2 things you would like to recommend at the regional level that we need to enhance?